December 3rd, 1994 is a very important day in video game history, marking the Japanese launch of the Sony PlayStation. Japan got a nearly year head start on most other regions, which wouldn't receive the system until the latter half of 1995 or later. This sometimes isn't for the best, as was the case with Sega's Dreamcast. But the PlayStation? Well, it seemed to fare a bit better, with a diverse and steady stream of games right out of the gate. Even if there were maybe a few too many Mahjong games. In commemoration of the legendary system's 30th anniversary, let's take a look at not only the system's December 3rd launch titles, but its entire lineup of 17 games released in 1994. Did early Japanese adopters have it good? Was it too early for developers to take advantage of the PS1's strengths? Let's find out. Starting things off at the system's December 3rd launch is A4 Evolution, A Reisha de Ikko 4, or let's take the A Train 4. Yeah, not exactly the shortest title, though it's not the only one like that. If you saw my original Japanese launch games episode, this was one of the ones I skipped, so I guess it's a good one to start with. Anyway, starting the game up, its title screen simply tells you to push button. Okay, well, as soon as you do that, it throws you right into the game. I was not expecting that. So what's A4 about? Well, it has you setting up various public transit systems in numerous pre-made environments, such as a big city, a series of islands, or an amusement park. Along with these train tracks and roads, you can also place other city structures, such as restaurants or parks. You can probably already tell, but this game looks and feels a lot like SimCity. In fact, the North American version was even published by sim game publisher Maxis. That makes this one of only 2 Japanese PS1 launch games that got an official American release. One cool thing this game does is that you can switch to a 3D view from any of your buses or trains. I can't help but appreciate the fact that everything you see in your 2D world-building view also has a 3D equivalent. I also like the game's chill music. The default track the game starts with reminds me of Final Fantasy VII's Costa del Sol theme, and you can't go wrong with that. With this chill music and overall chill vibe, I could certainly see someone getting absorbed in this game for hours, in the same way as a SimCity game. Is it as good as SimCity? Well, no. It doesn't quite feel as deep. It's really more like playing with model train tracks than anything. But if that's your thing, then you might just get a lot of enjoyment out of this game. I mean, there was definitely an audience. This was the 4th entry in its series after all, and would be followed by many more sequels. Still, with that said, I need to mention this game's biggest sin: its save file. A4 takes up the entire 15 blocks of a PS1 memory card. It's a good thing I have a basic understanding of Japanese, or I would have wiped my card to make a save. I guess it explains why the game's special edition included a memory card. The second launch game we'll be looking at is Crime Crackers. This game is an action RPG from Mediavision, the makers of the Wild Arms series, that has you playing as a team of space cops as you face a group of dangerous space pirates. Though, aside from the bosses, you mainly fight robots. The gameplay is all in first person, as you traverse various outer space locations consisting of long hallways filled with locked doors you need to find keys for. It can get a bit confusing since everything tends to look the same, so you'll need to rely a lot on the game's map. which you initially don't have access to until you find the right item partway through the first level. You control 3 characters who you can switch between at any time, each with a different attack style, 2 being long range with ammo, and 1 being short ranged and unlimited. You need to stop and aim to attack, and are unable to move forward or backwards at this time, though you can block and strafe. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it's not as bad as it may sound. As for the story, it's told in a fairly simple visual novel style, with talking character heads and still images. It also starts with a Star Wars style text crawl that goes on for way too long as the music plays way too loud. Seriously, this game's music is strangely loud. But sadly, there's no early 90s CG cutscenes, or even a cool hand-drawn one like in Wild Arms. Well, unless you reach the end of the game to see the final cutscene, or enter a secret code to view it. Speaking of CG cutscenes, this game actually reminds me a lot of the North American PS1 launch game, Kileak: The DNA Imperative. Both games have you wandering sci-fi hallways while fighting robots that explode in very satisfying ways upon defeat. In my original launch games video, I said I preferred Kileak's gameplay to Crimecrackers due to the ability to move while shooting. But you know what? Upon my more recent play sessions, I can say I definitely prefer Crimecrackers. Visually, Crimecrackers is far less boring. In fact, I kinda love the art style. I originally bought this game at a book off back in 2014 simply because I thought the cover art was great. Though repetitive, the in-game graphics have a nice look to them as well. In general, 3D PS1 games that went for a more cartoony look do tend to hold up better. This one also has what I'd call a better sense of progression than Kileak. Between levels, you can buy new equipment and sell items you found. Getting a new gun and finding it kills your robot foes way faster than before is a great feeling, as is finding upgrades to your ammo capacity and health while exploring. Some outlets gave this game very harsh reviews upon release, but honestly, I really enjoy it. Considering this game's historical significance as one of the first PS1 games, as well as its connection to the Wild Arms series, it would be a great contender for an English translation patch. Next is Gokujo Parodius Da Deluxe Pack. This is the first of many Konami shooter collections the PS1 would see, with this one focusing on, of course, the Parodius series. It includes 2 games, Gokujo Parodius and Parodius Da. So yeah, the title of this collection is a mashup of the 2 games included. Now, if you don't know, Parodius is a parody of legendary space shooter series Gradius. Get it? It has similar gameplay, with you flying vertically and shooting everything in sight, but with far stranger enemies and environments. And this isn't just a style parody, as you get to play as the ship from the Gradius games, the Vic Viper, if you so choose. The games include characters from other Konami games as well, including the Twinbee from, well, Twinbee, and the Penguin from Antarctic Adventure. This makes the series, which dates back to the 80s, one of the earliest franchise mashups from a popular game publisher. Anyway, the 2 games included both feature similar gameplay, but have vastly different life systems. In Parodius Da, when you die, which generally happens in a single hit, that's it. You go back to a checkpoint. This gives it a very old school feel, though it luckily at least gives you unlimited continues. Gokujo Parodius, on the other hand, is far more forgiving, with the lives being more like a health bar. You pick up instantly where you were killed, until you run out of them, after which you will need to go back to a checkpoint. Of course, if you play on 2-player, you don't have to worry about checkpoints at all, and can keep playing until the 2 of you reach the end of the game. While the way you play through them is a bit different, both games have a very similar presentation, and it's a great one at that. They're extremely unexpected and wacky in a way I found to be very likable, with soundtracks made up of well-known classical tunes that lead into fun, original tunes, depending on the situation. They've just got a great vibe to them. At the time of release, some people may have been disappointed with the lack of 3D from a game launching with a brand new 3D capable system, though that seems to have been more of a Western mindset than a Japanese one, as you will see from a good number of these 94 games. For comparison, the 2D shooter collection that launched with the PlayStation in North America, the Raiden Project, had a 3D demo that played before starting the game, which was cool, but unnecessary. Deluxe Pack is a very fun shooter collection, and one of the better releases from the PS1's launch, as well as its overall lineup from '94. Up next is Mahjong Goku Tenjiku. Now, looking at the box art and not understanding the kanji, you might think that this is an awesome action game or RPG. But nope, it's a Mahjong game. In case you hadn't already guessed, this one is based on Journey to the West, with you playing as and facing off against various characters from the famous story. To make things interesting, instead of playing as Goku, I went with Cho Hakai, the pig guy. This game has a pretty decent presentation. You have an overworld map with you selecting where to go to face your opponents. On top of that, you get fun little voiced interactions between the characters during the rounds. Before a match, you get a warning that may make you think there's something wrong with the game, but all it's telling you is that turning off or resetting the system mid-match will result in you losing that match's progress. I guess this was for the old people who probably made up most of this game's audience. One thing that's kind of interesting is that this was published by EA. That is a very American company, and I had no idea they ever published any games in Japan that didn't originate from the West. But here's one that's very Eastern and, I would guess, never left Japan. If you know how to play Mahjong, I'd imagine this would be fairly enjoyable, even if you're like me and can't understand most of the menus. It has a very charming presentation. If you don't know the game, well, you probably won't have much fun. Or it may inspire you to learn the game. Who knows? And now, Mahjong Station Mazin. Yep, the PlayStation launched with not one, but two Mahjong games. In fact, they were even made by the same developer. However, they are at least fairly different. While Goku Tenjiku featured completely 2D graphics, this one goes all out with the 3D. And you know what? It was actually one of the better 3D showcases of the PS1's launch. Gameplay features fully animated characters, with your opponents dramatically smashing down Mahjong pieces with screaming over-the-top facial expressions. It almost feels like a fighting game along the lines of Battle Arena Toshinden.
Yep! Hit it!
So yeah, this one definitely outdoes Goku Tenjiku in the presentation department. It starts up with a dramatic cutscene explaining the plot to make you feel like you're about to partake in an epic journey. This feels like the game that Goku Tenjiku's cover art failed to deliver on. Now, I will say that this one moves a lot slower than the other one, since you have to watch your opponent's move animations each time. On the other hand, I feel the pieces are a lot easier to make out, particularly the bamboo ones. If you were choosing between the two launch Mahjong games, it was kind of like, do you want something more intense or more easygoing? Goku Tenjiku was aiming more toward the older crowd, while Station Mazin was aimed more toward the younger crowd. And now, Nekketsu Oyako. This is a traditional 2D beat 'em up done with a fun comedic take, and is one of the PlayStation's best launch titles. In fact, in this channel's second video ever, which asks the question of what is the best Japanese PS1 launch game to never come to the US, I said it was this game. In it, you play as a family, or hot-blooded family as the title translates to, trying to rescue their kidnapped mom. Each family member plays fairly differently, with a completely unique set of moves to master, as well as items that are exclusive to specific members. Only Rondo, the dad, can drink beer to regain health. His two teenage kids, Ryo and Tora, are treated to an adults-only message. Gotta love that. Rondo also can't pick up the small firearms you come across. I guess they're too tiny for his massive arms. He can, however, pick up the incredibly powerful bazooka. That kinda reminds me of Fighting Force, actually. As mentioned, the game often comes across as fairly comedic. In fact, I might even call it a parody of beat-em-ups. At one point, you're swallowed by a whale and have to fight octopuses and H2O. There's also these cat girls you come across who apologize and run away after you hit them. And there are other over-the-top moments as well, such as when you fight this massive onslaught of enemies on top of a moving roller coaster. Actually, that brings me to one of the game's weaker aspects. There are times when it slows down a ton. It's not always, but it does happen often enough in specific areas that it is noticeable. The game also has these little details you gotta appreciate. Small enemies will try to pick up a bazooka and explode. There's an enemy named Freddy that looks like Jason. And hey, look, it's a PlayStation! That's awesome. This got me thinking. A Sega Saturn port was released about half a year later in 1995. Do you pick up a Saturn in that version? Well, yes. This brings me to another thing. As was the case with a lot of 2D games from this era, the Saturn version plays a lot better. It's much smoother without any of the slowdown. That crazy roller coaster part runs just fine. It also lets you know how many continues you have. Maybe in the PlayStation version it's unlimited, but I was never sure. Now, the audio is noticeably lower quality, but I will say this is the overall better version. So, if you are interested in trying this game, you might want to play it on the Saturn. But with that said, the PlayStation version does have an English fan translation, so that's a major plus. It really only applies to the game's intro, options menu, and ending cutscene, but hey, that's still cool. Regardless of which version you play, Nekketsu Oyako is a very enjoyable beat-em-up, presented in a memorable way. As far as PlayStation games go, it is indeed one of the best releases of '94. Ridge Racer. This is a fast-paced, very fun arcade racer that was the PlayStation's killer app at launch. It was the only Japanese launch game that would appear in other region launches, and is the best PS1 launch game, period. If you've watched my PlayStation Top 7 episode covering 1995, or my North American PS1 launch games episode, well, you've heard me go into quite a lot of depth on this game already, so I'll try to bring up some things I haven't before. 4 years after its initial PlayStation release, an improved version of Ridge Racer would be included with the game's fourth entry, Ridge Racer Type 4. This could be seen as the best version on the system, as it plays at a higher resolution and increases a frame rate up to 60 FPS, making for a much smoother experience. The major downside is that you only race against a single car. Another thing I mentioned before, but didn't quite do a good job of presenting, was how the game lets you insert music CDs into the system while the game is playing to listen to during gameplay. So, here's one Namco game soundtrack playing in another. So, the tracks do start up halfway through and don't restart when they end, but it's still pretty cool. Seriously, Ridge Racer is still well worth playing. If you want to see the first great showcase of what the PS1 could do, this is it. And now we go from the best PS1 launch game to the worst with Tama, Adventurous Ball in Giddy Labyrinth. Now, I'll start off by pointing out the one thing I do like about this game, which is its intro cutscene. We see Tama, which means ball, playing around in his world. He lives in a wood cabin for some reason. He plays on a seesaw. The camera comes down through the clouds. Something about the combination of visuals and derpy music is just a perfect representation of early era 3D gaming, and I just think it's great. But that's just an intro cutscene. The actual game is awful. You know those maze games where you try to guide a metal ball to a goal? That's this. Did anyone ever play one of those and say, man, this is great, but it'd be even better if it was a video game? So you tilt the world around and, yes, guide Tama to a goal. Sometimes you can't even see what you're doing if you don't have the camera positioned correctly. There's also a timer, though it's the slowest timer I've ever seen. When it says 30, you have way more than 30 seconds. Your only enemy, as far as I can tell, is a cow that will chase you around if you bump into it. Aside from that, your main obstacle is various holes you need to avoid. There was one part I just couldn't pass, where I had to take a floating bridge to the goal, but if I miss it and fall down, I'm back at the start of the maze. And since the timer has almost run out at that point, I'm screwed. Between the lack of direct control over your character, or any sort of save feature, the bad camera angles, the unclear visuals, and the ever-present timer, this game can be really stressful. It's crazy that the game from the launch lineup most obviously aimed at kids is like this. This is absolutely the worst Japanese PS1 launch game, and is possibly the system's worst game of 1994. We now move on from December 3rd of 94 to the 9th with our first non-launch title, Kikuni Masahiko Warao Fukesan Pachi Slot Hunter. Yeah, definitely the longest title we'll be seeing. This is also possibly the weirdest game we'll be looking at. This game starts with fully voiced comic book style panels following the story of Machiko, a female police officer. After this goes on for a while, the game suddenly sends you into a Pachi slot casino. Okay. You can choose between different machines and which one to sit at. Then you start playing slots. That's it. You're given a goal of a specific amount of coins, but you actually don't need to meet it. You can just pause the game, quit the slots, and then watch a new scene until you're taken back to the casino. The problem is, if you do this, the comic's story goes in a bad direction, eventually leading to a bad ending. So if you want a good ending, you'll need to be at this for quite a while. And this game is very tedious. Even when you're doing very well and raking in the coins, it's not that many coins. This is just a very slow game. Although different outcomes in the comic's story based on your performance is a fairly cool concept to mix with this gameplay, it's still not very fun gameplay. You'd be better off going to the casino in a Dragon Quest game. There, you at least get useful rewards that help you in non-casino gameplay, and the casinos themselves are not nearly as tedious. Now, I guess Pachi Slot Hunter is kind of notable in that it was made by Human, the studio behind the Clock Tower series. They are definitely an interesting developer, and this game's unique nature is more proof of that. So yeah, it's worth checking out if you're a fan. I guess it'd also be worth trying if you want to simulate using a Pachi slot machine without spending the money. I mean, the game exists, so I'm sure there are people who want to do that. Still, this is probably the worst PS1 game of '94 outside of Tama. It's not janky or frustrating like that one, but it's still very hard to recommend. Twinbee Tyson Puzzle Dama. If you don't know Twinbee, it's a vertical shooter series that has you piloting a talking ship known as the Twinbee. This series was actually fairly big in Japan, and this is just one of its numerous spin-offs. This game combines Twinbee's characters with the gameplay of Puzzle Dama, which is basically just Puyo Puyo, but instead of connecting 4 pieces of the same color, you only need to match 3. So if you like Puyo Puyo, you may just like this one as well. This game has some great sprite work. The characters reacting to the changing situation as the match goes on is very well done, and just plain fun to see. It also has a very likable cast of characters to choose from, with not just varying personalities, but gameplay styles as well. So it gives you a reason to change things up between rounds. You can play a single-player story mode, complete with voiced scenes in between levels, or a 2-player versus mode, both of which are fairly fun. And that's not all. Similar to Konami's shooter collections from the era, this is actually 2 games in one, as it includes the original version of Puzzle Dama. Now, while this version of the game is more or less the same gameplay-wise, it has a very different personality. While Twinbee has a somewhat lighthearted vibe to it, this one has a bit more of an edge. I really like the graphical style of this one as well. The only thing that could be seen as a downgrade is a lack of voiced interactions between levels. This is another '94 release that I can definitely recommend. I really enjoyed this one. Moving on from December 9th of '94 to the 16th, we get to Kingsfield. No, this isn't the game released in North America as Kingsfield. That is this game's sequel. The one we're looking at now never received an official English release. Kingsfield is a first-person RPG that has you exploring monster-filled caves while slowly unlocking new areas and gaining new equipment. Unlike Kingsfield 2, which has large outdoor environments, this one takes place entirely within these dark interiors. Guess you wouldn't get to see the field the title refers to until the sequel. These caves kinda give off a vibe similar to the original Tomb Raider games. Hey, the first Tomb Raider also never had you going outside. This was made by renowned developer From Software, and is kind of like a precursor to their Souls games. It has a similar vibe and gameplay, though it is much easier. The combat basically consists of running up to an enemy, timing your very slow weapon slash, then backing off before your foe can land a hit, then repeating the process. There aren't really complicated attack patterns to learn, at least as far as I saw during my play sessions. One thing that is maybe a problem is the speed at which your character turns. Just wow. That is awful. I often found myself pressing the D-pad harder than necessary as if it'd make me move faster, but you'll just have to deal with it. I mean, considering how slow you attack and the equally sluggish movement of your enemies, it does match the game's overall speed and isn't really a hindrance, just an annoyance. While this game is an RPG that is indeed Japanese, I wouldn't quite call it a JRPG. The gameplay and overall vibe is very Western inspired, feeling like the Western PC RPGs from the era. I guess the same goes for FromSoft's later titles. Not many people call those games JRPGs, and the same can be applied here. That's why I consider the first PS1 JRPG to get a Western release to be Beyond the Beyond, and not this game's sequel, which did release a few months before that one. Something that is probably worth mentioning: if you've ever seen that old magazine scan showing some low polygon skeletons with a caption stating, "The PlayStation can produce mind-boggling effects," that actually originated from this game. Kinda cool. And mind-boggling. And, of course, another thing that should be mentioned is that there is an unofficial English translation of this game, making it far more easily accessible than some of the other Japan exclusives from '94. While Kingsfield is definitely slow, it has a very solid feel to it, with a satisfying sense of progression. If you can handle the speed and enjoy explorational gameplay, you might want to give it a try. Our second of two December 16th games is MotorToon Grand Prix. Now, you may be thinking, hey, I know that game, but there's a good chance the game you're thinking of is actually its sequel. The 1996 game released in North America as MotorToon Grand Prix is actually MotorToon Grand Prix 2 in Japan. The one we're looking at now is the Japan exclusive first. Yep, just like Kingsfield. This is a racing game that has you playing as a cast of fake cartoon characters who are very much in the vein of old Warner Brothers, Fleischer Studios, and Disney cartoons. In my mini review of the second game, I said the game's style was kind of like an anime take on Roger Rabbit, and the same can be applied here. All the cars have this fittingly cartoony, stretchy movement that still looks great. The animations of the characters themselves are also impressive, whether you win or lose. The tracks, though, are a bit lacking in the details department, with a lot of pop-in. Still, you gotta appreciate the giant PlayStation that appears in the level where everything is small. The game has not only standard races, but also time trial variations that differ depending on if you're playing with one or two players. One thing that is kind of disappointing is that if you're playing a single-player Grand Prix race, About half of the vehicles you're racing against are generic blue race cars, with the other half being the ones you can play as. This game's cast is fairly small, with only 5 racers, so maybe they didn't have time to make a full roster to race against. Something that is a bit of a problem is that it's not always clear where you should be driving. I thought this hole was a tunnel I was supposed to drive into, but nope. I also once found myself suddenly heading the wrong way down the track, unsure of how it happened. Lastly, there's seemingly only one power-up, which randomly makes you into a giant running version of your racer, or does nothing. The second game, in comparison, has all the power-ups you'd expect from this type of racing game, such as projectiles and speed boosts, that you can use whenever you want. Really, the sequel improves upon this game in nearly every way, which is to be expected from a good follow-up. The tracks are much more detailed, more interesting, and don't have you guessing where to go. There's a larger cast, which I mentioned. There's even a fun little intro cutscene, which is something this game doesn't have. The only advantage the sequel doesn't have over this game is the 2-player mode. While the first Motor Toon Grand Prix has the traditional split-screen mode you'd expect from a racing game, its sequel only has a link cable mode, requiring 2 PlayStations and 2 TVs. So, good luck pulling that off. This was the very first game from Gran Turismo developer Polyphony Digital, and there are definitely signs of the series' DNA in this one. But if you do want to play a game from this series, stick with the second one. Next up is Geomcube. This is the first release we'll be looking at from December 22nd of '94, which would be the PS1's most release-filled day of the year other than its launch. This was published by Technos, who is not to be confused with Neketsu Oyako's publisher, Technosoft. And this game would also get an official American release in '96, making it the only '94 game outside the launch to do so. Geomcube is a puzzle game that's kind of like a 3D version of Tetris. You have a bunch of blocks of varying shapes and sizes you need to position into place as they fall. Fill in a whole row and it gets erased. Actually, when a 3D version of Tetris was released several years later, it was more or less the same thing. There are several different modes you can play, such as a challenge mode where you need to beat a certain number of stages, versus computer mode where you, well, face a computer opponent, and a 2-player mode, which is, as you'd guess, pretty much the same as the versus computer mode. Though, the computer opponents do get these awesome intros that you don't get when playing against a friend. Seriously, these are peak 90s 3D. So, a few things about the gameplay. It can be a bit hard at first to get used to rotating your blocks, which may lead to you making some mistakes. And compared to regular Tetris or other 2D puzzle games, it's also a lot harder to recover when you start messing up, since you can't see what's going on in the unfilled areas that aren't visible directly from above. You do get a little visualization on the side that lets you know how high you're getting, but that's it. Still, this game is fairly fun once you get the hang of it, which doesn't take that long to do. It has a fun soundtrack and various quirks that make it enjoyable. I mean, you gotta love having epic 3D puzzle fights as not Ultraman. Now, the best PS1 puzzle game of '94 is definitely Twinbee Tyson Puzzle Dama, but this one is worth giving a try if you like the genre. Moving on, we get to Homa Hunter Lime, Special Collection, Volume 1, or Jewel Bem Hunter Lime as it says in English. Wait, what's a BEM? This is an animated adventure game about titular character Lime's quest to hunt down and defeat various yokai who possess the fabled Homa/Jewel Bems. And boy, is she sure titular. Actually, a lot of the time, you don't even control Lime, but her partner, Boss. It isn't until halfway into the second level, where she goes undercover at a high school, that you get to control her. Really, control is being generous. You basically choose between 3 options in a menu: look, talk, and think, until it moves on to the next scene. Just keep selecting stuff until the story progresses. This is basically just an anime where you lightly nudge the plot along. In fact, after beating levels, you unlock the option to straight up watch them without any player interaction. I mean, the levels are basically episodes, complete with intro and outro credit sequences, and teasers for the next level/episode. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. Of course, to fit all these episodes onto a single PlayStation disc, the animation on display is pretty bare bones, with you often looking at a static screen while the characters talk. Though, it can be impressive at times. Other than the intro and outro, the animation you see isn't hand-drawn, but is instead sprite-based, similar to what you saw in a lot of Sega CD games, such as the Lunar series. Anyway, the first level has you tracking down a candle yokai. You eventually catch him, only for him to get the upper hand and escape, leading to him spraying his wax everywhere and... What does this look like? Actually, you get a lot of stuff like that in this game. Like this. Or this. Or, nice veiny horn you've got there. Homa Hunter Lime is, as you would say, a very horny game made for a very specific audience.
怒らないのか。差別だ。やかましい。
実況パワフルプロ野球。
And now we get to 1994's one and only PlayStation sports game, Jikyo Powerful Pro Yakyu, or Baseball 95. This was the third in Konami's very long-running series, coming after the somewhat confusingly titled Jikyo Powerful Pro Baseball 94 and Jikyo Powerful Pro Baseball 2. It would then be followed up with Jikyo Powerful Pro Baseball 3. Pick a naming convention, guys. Anyway, I played a 2-player match and went with the Chunichi Dragons, because they are based in Nagoya, which is where I live. Still, I couldn't pull off a single slam dunk, and what the hell is this wooden thing? This game sucks. Just kidding, I'm not that clueless. Actually, this was pretty easy to pick up and get into. Sometimes these sports games can be a little bit hard to figure out for those who aren't diehard fans, but not this one. Everything was pretty easy to pull off, while still feeling like it had some depth to it. This game has a very likable art style that is all its own. You definitely wouldn't confuse this for another series. All the sprites on display are well animated and full of personality. I don't know why my pitcher keeps looking like he's drunk, but I dig it. Oh, and look, there's a reference to another series we looked at, Twinbee. Now, I did find the single-player mode's computer opponent to be way too good at the default settings I played at, but 2-player? Pretty fun. This game's quick-to-learn gameplay, alongside its cartoony and fun vibe, can make it enjoyable even for people who don't watch sports.
打ちました。タイムリーヒット。
Up next is Kakinoki Shogi. This is a very simple game where you play the classic Japanese board game Shogi, which is kind of like a more complicated version of chess. So if you know chess, you can probably get the hang of it fairly quickly. Unlike the two Mahjong games we looked at, which both have themes and gameplay elements that give them unique personalities, this game really just exists to let you play shogi, either against a friend or the computer. It does have some nice traditional Japanese-sounding music that gives it a specific atmosphere, but there are no characters or storylines or anything like that. One thing I do like about this game, if you're like me and haven't quite memorized what everything can do, you can hold the X button when selecting any of your pieces and it will show you all of their possible moves. That is very helpful. However, it doesn't let you do the same thing when hovering over your opponent's pieces. I feel like I would have done better if I could have done that, as opposed to hovering over my own pieces of the same type, assuming they're still on the board. But yeah, I suppose this game would have been fine if you wanted some virtual shogi on the PlayStation. Though, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a whole slew of better and more interesting shogi games on the system that came later.
先手3七銀後手3八金打つ詰みました。
And now our final PS1 game of 1994, Twin Goddesses. Now, first of all, it might be worth mentioning that this is the second most expensive of these 94 games, after Nekketsu Oyako. Luckily, none of them are in the $100 plus range, at least when buying within Japan, but compared to most of these games, this one, Nekketsu Oyako, and to a lesser extent, Kingsfield, are a bit more pricey. So, looking at a second-hand copy of this game, it might be hard to figure out what it's about. There are no screenshots on the back, or even a basic description of the gameplay. Homa Hunter Line was like this as well. Is it because it's overly sexy like that one? Well, outside of parts of the opening cutscene, no. This is a fighting game, and a very interesting one at that. And yes, this was the system's first fighter, predating more well-known 3D fighter Battle Arena Toshinden by several weeks. The look of this game is kind of like a cross between Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. Some characters are digitized actors, while others are sprite-based cartoon characters. But aside from that, it's actually fairly different from both of those games. You have not only a health bar, but a magic bar as well. Before a round, you can purchase upgrades to your HP or MP, as well as other items, including single-use magic attacks, such as fireballs. This shop is pretty time-consuming, so you can turn it off if you don't want to use it in between two-player battles. You probably will want to use it in the single-player mode though. Single player has you picking between one of the two twin goddesses that the title refers to, Nina and Sillin. We're on a quest to defeat the evil witch Carmilla and save the kingdom of Love Radiant. Yep, that's really where the game takes place, and it's kind of amazing. The cheese doesn't end there though, as you get several live-action cutscenes that are corny in the best way possible, with a 70s prog rock soundtrack backing it all up. The soundtrack may just be the best part of this game. Actually, I might just go as far as calling it my favorite soundtrack of any 94 PS1 game. One cool thing about this game is that its story is fully understandable in English, with an opening crawl that is translated to English to accompany its Japanese voiceover. Seriously though, what is it with games from this era and slow Star Wars text crawls? This one is just as bad as Crime Crackers, and goes on for ages. Well, at least it's followed by one of its amazing cutscenes. Now, the actual fighting gameplay is just not very good. I found that I could rarely get in close enough to land a punch, and mainly relied on kicks. The low kick especially was useful. Even on the easiest setting, or ease as it's called here, the computer is so cheap that you've got no choice but to be cheap as well. Spam those low kicks and fireballs, and don't even think about playing on difficulty. Another thing that sucks is how each character has different health levels. I mean, does this look fair? This character has way more health than this one. I guess you can even it out through the shop, but it seems pretty unbalanced. Also, I found that the anime characters attacked a lot quicker and tended to have a lot less of an opening between attacks than their live-action counterparts. So, I cannot recommend Twin Goddesses for its fighting, because it is simply not very enjoyable. But the presentation is amazing. Seriously, I've never played something that quite had this game's vibe. If you appreciate things that are cheesy in the very best way, or just want to play something that's kind of like a 70s prog rock album brought to life, you might just want to check it out.
よく頑張ったわね。
Well, that's that. Every PlayStation game released in 1994. A fairly diverse lineup, with a good amount of decent games, though they pale in comparison to the legendary titles that would follow. Now, if I had to narrow these games down to 5 that I would most recommend, I'd go with Gokujo Parodius Da Deluxe Pack, Neketsu Oyako, Ridge Racer, Twinbee Tyson Puzzle Dama, and Kingsfield. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to see more launch games and Japanese gaming videos in the future, as well as series reviews and other gaming roundups. Fans of the channel may also want to support it on Patreon for early access footage, a chance to pick games for review, and more. Well, with that said, I think it's about time to end this video. As always, thanks for watching The Legend of Games.